There's something nobody tells you about the hardest moments of your life. While you're living through them, while you're drowning in confusion and pain, while everything feels like it's falling apart, there's a quiet intelligence at work. An intelligence that doesn't speak in words, doesn't offer explanations, and certainly doesn't ask for your permission. You've felt it, haven't you? That strange sensation when you look back at something that nearly destroyed you and realize it was actually the thing that saved you. The job that crushed your spirit but taught you what you actually valued. The relationship that ended in heartbreak but showed you what love isn't supposed to feel like. The failure that humiliated you but forced you to discover strengths you never knew existed. Most people call this coincidence. Some call it fate. But there's something much more profound happening here. Something that changes everything once you see it clearly. What if the very experiences you've been trying to escape, the ones that made you question everything about yourself and your life, weren't random acts of cruelty? What if they weren't punishments for some cosmic crime you committed? What if they were invitations? We live in a world obsessed with comfort, with avoiding pain at all costs, with the belief that if something hurts, it must be wrong. We're taught that struggle is a sign we're off track, that difficulty means we're doing life incorrectly. But this couldn't be further from the truth, because while you were busy thinking life was breaking you, something else was happening entirely. Every person who has ever done anything meaningful, who has ever grown beyond their original limitations, who has ever discovered depths within themselves they didn't know existed, has walked through fire first. Not around it, not over it, through it. And they didn't emerge the same person who entered. Think about the last time something really challenged you. Not just inconvenienced you, but truly tested who you thought you were. In that moment, you probably felt like you were being dismantled piece by piece. Your old strategies stopped working. Your familiar patterns crumbled. The identity you'd built so carefully seemed to dissolve. And it was terrifying because you thought that identity was you. But what if it wasn't? What if that dismantling was the most necessary thing that could have happened? What if life, in its strange wisdom, knew exactly what needed to be stripped away so something truer could emerge? This isn't about toxic positivity or pretending that pain doesn't hurt. Pain hurts. Loss is devastating. Failure can feel like the end of everything. But buried beneath the surface of these experiences is a process so subtle, so patient, that most people miss it entirely. They're so focused on the discomfort that they never notice the reconstruction happening simultaneously. You see, life has a peculiar way of preparing us for things we can't yet imagine. It doesn't hand us a roadmap or explain its methods. Instead, it presents us with experiences that seem unrelated, sometimes even cruel, that are actually building something within us, building capacity, building resilience, building wisdom that can only come from having walked through certain territories of human experience. Every difficult chapter in your story wasn't a detour. It was preparation. Preparation for a version of yourself that your current self can't even conceive of. Preparation for opportunities that would overwhelm the person you were before. Preparation for a life that requires exactly the strength, wisdom, and depth that can only be forged in the fires you've already walked through. But here's where most people get stuck. They resist the process. They fight against the very experiences that are trying to prepare them for something greater. They spend so much energy trying to go back to who they were before, trying to return to the comfort zone that life has clearly outgrown for them, that they miss the entire point of what's happening. The caterpillar doesn't resist becoming a butterfly because it understands something we've forgotten. It knows that the dissolution of its current form isn't death, it's metamorphosis. But we, in our human complexity, have convinced ourselves that any change to our identity is a threat to our existence. What if you stopped fighting the process? What if you stopped trying to preserve the version of yourself that life is clearly trying to evolve? What if you trusted that the same force that grows trees from tiny seeds, that heals cuts without your conscious intervention, that beats your heart while you sleep, might actually know what it's doing with your life too? This doesn't mean becoming passive or giving up agency. It means recognizing that there's a deeper intelligence at work in your experiences than your conscious mind can grasp. It means understanding that resistance to growth often creates more suffering than the growth itself. Every skill you've ever developed required you to be uncomfortable first. You couldn't walk until you fell down countless times. You couldn't read until you struggled with letters that made no sense. You couldn't drive until you felt overwhelmed by all the things you had to remember simultaneously. Growth and discomfort are inseparable partners. But somewhere along the way, many of us developed the idea that once we reached adulthood, growth should be comfortable, that we should be able to expand without contracting first, that we should be able to reach new heights without first having the ground beneath us shift. Life doesn't work that way. Life is constantly inviting us to become more than we currently are, and that invitation rarely arrives wrapped in pretty paper with a bow. It usually shows up disguised as a problem, a crisis, a loss, or a challenge that we'd rather not face. The most profound transformations happen not in spite of our difficulties, but because of them. The wisdom you carry now wasn't downloaded from a book or learned in a classroom. It was earned through experience. It was carved into you by moments that demanded more than you thought you had to give. And here's what's beautiful about this process. Once you begin to see it, once you recognize the pattern, everything changes. You stop being a victim of your circumstances and start being a student of them. You stop asking, why is this happening to me? And start asking, what is this trying to teach me? What is this preparing me for? This shift in perspective doesn't make the challenges easier, but it makes them meaningful. And meaning has the power to transform even the most difficult experiences into something purposeful, something that serves not just your growth, but your ability to serve others who are walking similar paths. Because that's another secret hidden in this process. The very experiences that prepared you for your own evolution also prepared you to guide others through theirs. Your deepest wounds often become your greatest sources of wisdom. Your most private struggles often hold the keys to helping others unlock their own potential. You weren't being broken, you were being prepared. Prepared for a life that requires exactly who you're becoming. Prepared for opportunities that need precisely the combination of strength and sensitivity, wisdom and humility, courage and compassion that only your unique journey could have developed within you. The person you're becoming couldn't have emerged any other way. Every twist in your path, every setback that felt like the end of the world, every moment when you thought you couldn't take another step, they were all necessary ingredients in creating the version of yourself that was always trying to emerge. So stop apologizing for who you've become because of what you've been through. Stop diminishing your story because it doesn't look like everyone else's. Stop wishing you could go back to being the person you were before life asked more of you. That person served their purpose, but they were never meant to be your final form. The struggles that carved you weren't accidents. The losses that hollowed you out weren't cruel jokes. The failures that humbled you weren't evidence of your inadequacy. They were sculpting tools in the hands of a process far more intelligent than your fear-based mind could comprehend. Think about the moments when you felt most lost, when you couldn't see a way forward, when everything familiar had been stripped away and you were left standing in the wreckage of what used to be your life. In those moments, you probably felt abandoned by the universe, forgotten by whatever force you believed was supposed to protect you. But you weren't abandoned. You were being emptied out to make room for something larger. You were being cleared of old patterns that no longer served the person you were becoming. You were being prepared for a capacity you didn't even know you needed. The phoenix doesn't mourn its ashes. It doesn't spend time wishing it could go back to being the bird it was before the fire. It understands that the fire wasn't its enemy. The fire was its pathway to transformation. The ashes weren't evidence of destruction. They were the fertile ground from which something magnificent could rise. Your difficult seasons weren't detours from your purpose. They were the very thing shaping you for it. Every time you thought you were falling apart, you were actually falling together in a new way. Every time you felt like you were losing yourself, you were actually finding the parts of yourself that had been buried under layers of who you thought you were supposed to be. And here's what's remarkable about this process. The qualities you've developed through your struggles, the depth you've gained through your pain, the wisdom you've earned through your mistakes, these aren't consolation prizes for having suffered. They're the very attributes that will allow you to step into opportunities and relationships and versions of success that would have overwhelmed the person you used to be. The sensitivity that came from your heartbreak will help you recognize authentic connection when it appears. The resilience you built through your failures will carry you through challenges that would stop others in their tracks. The humility you learned from your mistakes will keep you grounded when success finally arrives. The compassion you developed through your own pain will make you a healing presence for others walking similar paths. None of this wisdom could have been taught to you. It had to be lived into you. It had to become part of your cellular memory, woven into the fabric of who you are so deeply that you can't separate the lesson from the lived experience. This is why some people seem to have an inexplicable depth, an unshakable presence, a quiet strength that can't be faked or manufactured. They've been prepared by life itself. They've been through the fire and emerged not bitter, but refined. Not broken, but rebuilt with stronger materials. You are one of these people. Whether you recognize it yet or not, whether you're still in the middle of the fire or just now seeing what emerged from it, you're being prepared for something that requires exactly who you're becoming. The person reading these words right now has survived every difficult day they've ever faced, has found ways to keep going when keeping going seemed impossible, has discovered reserves of strength they didn't know existed, has learned to navigate territories of human experience that many people never have to explore. That's not just survival. That's preparation. Preparation for a life that needs someone who has walked where you've walked. Someone who knows what it feels like to lose everything and find out you're still here. Someone who understands that the deepest pain often precedes the most profound transformation. Your story isn't over. The chapters that brought you to this moment weren't the conclusion. They were the foundation. They were the training ground. They were life's way of preparing you for what comes next. And what comes next requires exactly the person those experiences created within you. So trust the process, even when you can't see where it's leading. Trust that the same intelligence that knew how to grow you from a single cell into the complex being you are today also knows how to grow you from who you are into who you're meant to become. You weren't being broken, you were being prepared, and the preparation is almost complete. The question now isn't whether you'll survive what's coming. The question is whether you'll recognize the opportunities that require exactly the strength, wisdom, and capacity that your journey has built within you. Because they're coming, they're already here, and you're finally ready for them.